People who have stopped going to church, what made you stop? The focus on appearances. It seemed like no one actually gave a what went on behind closed doors as long as they weren't forced to acknowledge it. Felt like nobody would care if their back teeth were rotting out just as long as the front looked nice, so to speak. They said my mom's cancers was testing me and my family. I stopped going when I was 14 and two different people. One of them, the pastor, told me that dinosaurs never existed. I really went home that night, sat on my bed, and said to myself, I can't let myself ever get that, and I never went back. I was going 4 times a week too. It was a big part of my life. Holier than thou pastor was his secretary for years while married. They seemed to want money more than anything else. I read the Bible. Came to very different conclusions than those I was taught in church. Changes in belief. I stopped being forced to go. I started to realize I felt guilty for things that weren't truly wrong and didn't negatively impact others. I now don't need the interpretation of good and evil from others. I just do my best to be a good person on my own terms. Around 2003/2004, we got these 2 sermons in back-to-back weeks. 1. Being homosexual is an abomination against and is a horrible sin that goes against nature. And it's a disgrace to the Lord that these heathens legalized marriage. Massachusetts, 2. Although these priests were caught molesting children, we should forgive them as Jesus forgave. This carrot was the Catholic Church in a nutshell. And my entire family could not be part of this anymore. The hypocrisy was palpable. I was raised in the Church of Christ. Women aren't supposed to speak in front of men. Instead, they're supposed to filter their voice through their husband or father. My dad has Alzheimer's and my raised in the church husband beat me, cheated on me, lied, stole, and beat our kids. I also watched them drag a 16-year-old child to the front and excommunicate him in front of over 1,000 people. Evil effing cult. I went to a Baptist university and they were building a new football stadium. One day, at the dog park, I was talking with a professor who was also a preacher about the new stadium. We were both excited to hear that neither of us thought the stadium was a good idea. But I'll never forget the look of disgust on his face when I said that the money should go to helping the largely impoverished community around the university. He thought it should go to building more churches. It was then I realized that I have fundamentally different morals and ethics than churchgoers. The way the people in the church treated me, it just wasn't fulfilling anymore, and I came to the conclusion that most people use religion as a cover-up for their flaws. As a kid it was because it was absolutely boring. As an adult, because I don't believe subscribe to the teachings. I slept in one Sunday and loved it. Never went back to Sunday school. My oldest is in med school and my other kids are great kids/students. When people ask me how my wife and I raised great kids, I always say make sure you are rested. When I was going through my divorce, my pastor called me and told me he thought it would be best if I didn't come back to church until I got my life together. My ex-wife, she stayed and was welcomed with open arms. So, I'm a little disillusioned. Couldn't handle the hypocrisy anymore. One of my 4 sons is. I love him without reservation. The church says he's a sinner because of who he is. I'm out. I never really could connect with anyone in the church. They were too churchy. They didn't seem capable of having conversations that didn't revolve around the church or the Bible, and I can't just talk ABT that 24/7. The level of close-mindedness Oswell was quite infuriating and couldn't continue to deal with that. Stopped going to our family church when the pastor told me I was not allowed to leave my husband over domestic abuse unless he cheated on me. I left him anyway. I moved out of my parents' house. That was enough. Early on in my time in Iraq, I was a gunner on a Humvee. Some Iraqi kid, 8 to 10 threw a rock at me/the truck. I was pulling on the trigger before my brain realized rock, not danger. I didn't anyone but it really with me. I was a devout Catholic at the time. I went to next confession to get help. The priest was fixated on whether I had rubbed one out and was completely disinterested in what at the time the closest I've gotten to killing someone. It just spiraled from that point for a few years before I came to the conclusion that all man-made churches were corrupt and morally bankrupt. It just never was for me. I felt like I was faking something to be in there. And I was fairly confident most others were too. My answer is much less sophisticated or profound than most, but it's simple. Church is boring as. Too many fake people. Too many people who think Christianity and political beliefs go together. And too many people who rely on and don't want to do the work and fix their own problems. I learned about the manipulative tricks they pull to make people feel a certain way. Wasn't. It was mood lighting. The first instant I was permitted to choose. After my separation and divorce, not one person from my church called me to ask how I was doing. I grew up in that church and went as an adult after moving back to my hometown. There are other reasons, but this one still hurts 3 years later. I'll never go back to a Baptist church. I may not go back to church at all. I still pray every day. Reading the Bible cover to cover pretty well did it for me. The last time I went to my church was my mom's celebration of life service. It's been 8 years and I don't think I can set foot in the building without tears. The hypocrisy became exhausting. Preaching about loving thy neighbor and in the same breath condemning thy neighbor. The Sunday crowd treating service industry workers like absolute garbage. The greed, etc. Battlestar Galactica was on at the same time. Because when you really get down to it, it's just people telling you they know what happens when we die. I'm not basing my life's ideology around something that's impossible to know. When I was told only baptized Catholics get into heaven. Even as a child I knew that was wrong. I got old enough that nobody could make me go. So I stopped. The Christian right is neither. The marriage of politics and religion was too much for me. I got sat in the hall and not allowed to participate in Sunday school after declaring that Jesus was a zombie and there was no other way he could have possibly come back to life and refusing to budge from my very logical position on the matter. I was 8. It was not my last time getting in trouble for the Jesus is a zombie theory. I didn't really fit in with the flock. I was more of a black sheep. The increasing politicization of American churches. To the point where most seem completely at odds with the message of the Bible. I realized they all worship a mythology no different from stories about Greek and Roman gods. And I started looking around me and noticed all these supposedly good people were actually pretty up. Mean, racist, homophobic. Just about as far away from the actual teachings of Christ as can be. If Jesus took a look at what his followers have become, he'd just sit and cry. I've only ever met maybe 1 or 2 actually good Christians who live like Christ said we should. The rest of them are just pretending. Critical thinking. Reality and science. The fact that once an idea that the church says is against God's will or is definitely a fact is proven wrong by science or started being accepted by society. The church all of a sudden accepts it and deems it correct and or accepted. Proof is churches closing and being sold because they weren't making enough money. All religions should be taxed because all they are is another business. I gradually got sick of listening to one kind that didn't seem to match up with what the guy the whole religion's named after was saying. I got sick of seeing none of the people there living their lives like that guy said they should. And instead hunting around the whole book for justifications for the way they were already acting and thinking. I got sick of noticing how we were supposed to do less than the bare minimum in order to be considered good Christians and Baptists. Eventually it occurred to me that I was getting zero value out of listening to an up-jumped redneck behind a pulpit, claiming to be an authority on the unknowable. My son is trans. He was accepted when he was female. When he began transitioning to male, several congregation members let it be known they didn't approve. Then the pastor made an anti-LGBTQA comment and we were done. My son, who grew up as an altar server in that church, said to me shortly after that, I know I'm going to, so what difference does it make? The church did that to him. So them all too.